The Me Too campaign is making strides in Hollywood, but across the Atlantic it's been lost in translation. Acting legend Catherine Deneuve and 99 other French women have denounced the backlash against sexual harassment. They say it's puritanical and fueled by a hatred of men. This urge to send men to the slaughterhouse instead of helping women be more autonomous helps the enemies of sexual freedom, the 100 women said in a column published in Le Monde newspaper. France has its own anti-harassment campaign called Squeal on Your Pig. Millions of women across the country have used the hashtag to share their stories of sexual harassment. But Deneuve and others say that a man's right to pester a woman is essential to sexual freedom. Now there's a backlash to the backlash. Socialist politician Ségolène Royal called the newspaper column appalling. Former Minister of Women's Rights Laurence Rossignol decried what she called the dread of no longer existing without the gaze and desire of men. Prominent French feminist Catherine Deneuve accused Deneuve and others of trivialising sexual violence and holding victims in contempt. Minister for Gender Equality Marlène Schiappa said that recent scandals have forced a rethink of attitudes in France. Schiappa has kicked off nationwide consultations on a law that includes steps to fight sexual harassment on the streets.
Well, let's move on, though, Diptyka, and there is an op-ed piece written in Le Monde newspaper today creating quite a lot of controversy.
If there's one thing you read today, it's probably this article, because it is making waves here in France. It's making waves across the world for its content, really. This article was written by 100 prominent French women, including the actress Catherine Deneuve, basically condemning the Me Too movement as Puritanism that has essentially blurred sexual harassment and flirtatious behavior. Obviously, I'm not quoting word for word, but that's the essence of the article. I do quote from this article: "A woman in the same day can manage a team of people and enjoy being the sexual object of a man without being qualified as a, quote, whore, or as a vile accomplice of the patriarchy." They go on to say, I quote, "A woman can fight for equal salary but not be traumatized by someone who brushes up against her in the metro, even if that is a crime."
How have people been reacting to this letter?
Well, there's a lot of indignation, a lot of outrage, as you can imagine, because that Me Too movement is full of emotion, really, and it did take a long time to sort of get speed. Well, this piece, Le Figaro says, has sparked a wave of indignation, particularly from feminist groups who remind the authors of this piece that 1 in 6 women are harassed or raped in their lifestyle. This is no laughing matter, essentially. They call the piece revolting. Now, the French Minister for Gender Equality, Marlène Schiappa, has also responded by saying, rather sarcastically, that she has no knowledge of a man who's been fired for, quote, inadvertently touching a woman. In other words, her reaction really is that they've completely missed the whole point of the Me Too movement.
Deneuve is one of the signatories who says the recent wave of denunciations of sexual harassment following the Harvey Weinstein affair is creating a new feminism defined by hatred of men and sexuality. In the open letter published in Le Monde, the women say there is a new Puritanism afoot in the world. Well, we can discuss this further. Joining me is the French journalist Marie Billon. And in Paris, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, who signed the letter. She's also a columnist for The Daily and The Sunday Telegraph. Welcome to you both. Perhaps we can start with Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Tell us why you signed this letter.
I signed the letter because I had witnessed this opening up from something that was necessary and good, what happened at the time of the Dominique Strauss-Kahn scandal, and certainly the incredible piece of reporting by Ronan Farrow about Harvey Weinstein in a New Yorker, giving evidence that he had not only behaved in this incredibly unpleasant way, but he had destroyed women's careers if they did not yield to him, and sometimes even if they did. And I thought that was necessary. It had to be said, and then it has transformed into this kind of online social media dogpile, a kind of lynching where people are disappeared, and women are supposed to be those poor little weak creatures who can't tell the difference between a rapist, i.e. a criminal, and somebody who might want to pull, which is something that belongs to the realm of human relationships.
But aren't distinctions being made between somebody who might want to pull and men taking advantage of younger women in the workplace?
First of all, trying to take advantage in the workplace, especially if you're senior, is something that is actionable by law. It is sexual harassment at work. I'm entirely in favor of legislation being enshrined so that the minute there's something like that and somebody complains, their job should be protected, their promotion should be protected, they should not be demoted, they should not be transferred in something where they lose advantages or elements of career. It should be investigated, and there should be heavy fines for the companies which do not comply with this. But so that's, again, that's something that's already exists in law, and I think there should be more provisions so that the law is followed. This is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is this idea that we are Victorian violets, and some people believe that we can't defend ourselves. I mean, honestly, it's happened to me that somebody tried to cup a feel, as the saying goes, in the metro, and I usually shouted at him, will you stop touching me at once, in French, and people around me heard it and sometime laughed, and that was the end of it. I'm not denying there are instances in which it crosses over from the unpleasant to what really should not be happening to anyone. But I don't think we should conflate everything, and I also think that there's such a thing as judicial process. Destroying people's lives by social media is like the 1 minute hate in 1984.
Marie Billon, what do you think of what she has to say? There are too many things being conflated.
I think, in a sense, yes. I think this we've been going in France through an overcorrection after the Weinstein affair, I think. In a way, I understand the spirit of the letter. I don't really understand the details of it. It's true that women can see the difference between a man complimenting your eyes and complimenting your décolleté, for example. But I think the way France has taken the Weinstein affair is a bit different than, for example, in the UK. For example, the hashtag you had in the UK is Me Too. We had Call Out Your Pig, which is a much more aggressive hashtag, meaning that somehow women were called to war against attackers, and perhaps some say against men in general. I think young people in particular might be more listening to this kind of thing, because now it's incessant. If someone wants to woo you, they would just not wait for you to appear. They would call you, they would text you, they would tweet for you, they would Instagram you. There's so many ways that someone can woo you and be insistent, that perhaps now younger people have a lower threshold in terms of what kind of wooing is acceptable.
And there need to be more different rules then.
There might need some. I mean, it's social rule. It's not
social
something,
rules.
not laws in particular. I think we have too many laws in France, perhaps. I don't know in this section in particular, but I think yes, social rule, and we have to find our feet basically after what happened. And I think something important as well. In the letter, we talk about the sexual liberation. Women like Catherine Deneuve was young when there was this sexual liberation era, and perhaps feel like complimenting your décolleté was something that was a bit risque, so a bit welcome somehow, because it was new, it was fresh. Now, young people, if you are complimented on your décolleté or something like that, it just can happen all the time, because it's not risque anymore. It's not something daring. It's just something that can be just heavy-handed. So it's a generation thing, I think, as well.
Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, the point has been made that most of the signatories to this list are women who are established, they're professional, they have a confidence that comes with that. You said yourself that somebody tried to touch you and it was unwelcome, and you told them what for. There are a lot of women who are not as secure as you who would find that much more difficult, and maybe that's what this campaign is about.
Yes, but at the same time, I don't believe that we should teach young women that they are victims. When things happened to me on the metro, I was just somebody like anybody else on the metro, and if we ought to be able, within reasonable barriers, and I agree with Marie on this one, we ought to be able to fend for ourselves. And the other thing is, okay, I had this thing, I got out of the metro, I thought, well, what an idiot, but I'm not traumatized for the rest of my life. I've had more unpleasant things happening to me. I think most women have it, but these are not things that keep me up at night. These are things that have not blighted my life. And I don't think it's got to do with the fact that I have an interesting job or a certain age. I think it's got to do also with educating women and telling them, you can fight for yourself, and, start at 13. And I choose this age because I have a bad memory at age 13, but it has not blighted my life.
And Marie Billon, do you think it is fair enough, though, to talk about a new Puritanism that has come into our culture as a result of these scandals?
I think Puritanism is too heavy a word in a way. It's a new way of perhaps considering yourself. We are told when we are very young now to think about the way we present our body in terms of wearing a skirt or wearing the kind of décolleté, this kind of thing. So now perhaps, yes, somehow there's kind of a shift on the other direction. Liberty and freedom for women is not being as sexy, it's being as sexy as you want, but within some kind of remit. And that's the kind of Puritanism they are, I think talking about. But the idea that perhaps Puritanism, of course, is a religious word as well. So does that mean that perhaps it's because it's to satisfy men who think that women should be more modest, which is, of course, a debate that we have a lot in France? If that's the case, yes, absolutely not. We should remain and retain the right to shock people if we want to, but shocking people cannot be done on a daily basis. It has to be, point of shocking for it to work. So I think it's important to realize that basically fighting for some rights and the right to shock and the right to dress as you like is different as being, welcome to any advance of any man. It's very important what women told, when mother told their child, you can be as sexy as you want. That doesn't mean that this boy has to think that you are open to his advance. So women, I agree with Anne-Elisabeth, women have to fend for themselves perhaps a bit more, be taught to do that a bit more. And also men, boys, have to be told off a bit more when they try to leave the skirts of girls at school. I think that starts really at school age.
OK, Marie Billon and Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.
I think there is a momentum, definitely, with the Me Too movement. The thing also is that it's not women against men. We have to be working together. It's about a joint movement where we both support the same cause, not only just, on sexual abuse, but there are so many inequalities, as Zachary rightly mentioned. But if I'm talking more in the workplace, there are equal pay, gender inequalities, and yes, there is a momentum because we are raising the voice, we are talking about it, but we need to turn it into actions. And there are other things that governments, parliaments, UN nations need to do, like installing quotas. But there is also all the stereotyping that the media is portraying, that is playing a huge role as well in this. So we need to work not only on what is said and keep on talking about the movement, but we need to, now that there is this momentum, we need to take advantage of it and leverage it so that we change the status quo and make sure that there are other actions, not only in the media, not only in Hollywood, but across governments, across parliaments, across institutions, big corporations, so that there are actions that are taken out of it that will be making a positive change.
Time for us now to take a look at what's taking up ink on the international papers. Diptyque Laurent is with us in studio. Diptyque, let's start with this somewhat controversial, quite surprising letter from prominent French females.
An op-ed that appeared first in the French paper Le Monde and now has been widely picked up by pretty much all of the international press because it is quite controversial. As you said, it was written by around 100 female celebrities, including the French actress Catherine Deneuve, essentially decrying what they see as the new Puritanism, essentially saying that the Me Too movement has basically stifled sexual freedom, alleging, and I'm quoting here, that men have been punished summarily, they've been forced out of their jobs when all they did was touch someone's knee.
Okay, and it has sparked somewhat of an angry backlash in much of the media.
Well, a lot of those people who are at the forefront of the Me Too movement, including the Italian actress Asia Argento, well, she's been one of the first to tweet furiously back at this article. In a tweet, she accuses Catherine Deneuve and other French women of telling the world how their interiorized misogyny has lobotomized them to the point of no return. So that's a pretty stinging clapback there from Asia Argento. Now, one writer for the British daily The Guardian has also slammed the article, saying that women are not angry because they are puritanical, as the letter claims, but they are angry because they seek joy from sexual contact when it's on their own terms, not when it's in the form of abuse or exploitation at the hands of men.
What do you reckon, Stephen Carl, or would you prefer not to comment?
I prefer not to comment. I think it's a very interesting and ongoing debate. It's hard to see Catherine Deneuve's point of view, though.
Very hard. It's definitely an interesting one. I'm sure we'll spend many hours talking about it later on the day.
We're going to talk about the letter that has been written by a group of French women. And in fact, Catherine Deneuve, who you will definitely have heard of, she has defended men's right to hit on women without being forced out of their jobs. She's best known for her role as a bored housewife in Belle de Jour, and she's one of 100 well-known French women to sign a letter complaining about a new Puritanism in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein scandal. The letter says, rape is a crime, but trying to seduce someone, even persistently or cack-handedly, is not. Nor is men being gentlemanly a chauvinistic attack. Men have been punished, forced out of their jobs when all they did was touch someone's knee or try to steal a kiss. The authors argued that there was a new Puritanism afoot in the world. They said that while it was legitimate and necessary to speak out against the abuse of power by some men, the constant denunciations have spiralled out of control. According to the writers, this is creating a public mood in which women are seen as powerless, as perpetual victims. As women, we do not recognise ourselves in this feminism, which, beyond denouncing the abuse of power, takes on a hatred of men and of sexuality. Men had been dragged through the mud, they argued, for, quote, talking about intimate subjects during professional dinners, or for sending sexually charged messages to women who did not return their attentions. The letter attacked feminist social media campaigns like #MeToo and its French equivalent for unleashing this puritanical wave of purification. It claimed that legitimate protest against the sexual violence that women are subject to, particularly in their professional lives, had turned into a witch hunt. What began as freeing women up to speak has today turned into the opposite. We intimidate people into speaking correctly, shout down those who don't fall into line, and those women who refuse to bend to the new realities are regarded as complicit and traitors. The signatories, who included a porn star turned agony aunt, claimed they were defending sexual freedom, for which the liberty to seduce and importune was essential. Let's talk to Charlie Cuff. She's a writer and campaigner from The Second Source. That's a group of women journalists working to end sexual harassment in the media. And she has faced unwanted sexual advances. And also Rosie Millard is a feminist and also Deputy CEO from the Creative Industries Federation. And in our Leeds studio, Aisha Ali Khan, writer and blogger who was subjected to sexual harassment whilst working as a parliamentary aide. And in a moment, we'll speak to someone who has signed that letter in France. OK, hello, all of you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Good morning. Hi. And Aisha in Leeds as well. First of all, how do you respond, Rosie, to this letter?
Well, I think it's nuanced. I mean, I think that, obviously, you know, tapping someone on the knee or even flirting gently or smiling, you know, sexual attraction will happen in the workplace.
But the point about the letter is that even that behaviour is not allowed anymore, and that's what they're protesting against.
I think that is ridiculous. I mean, I think the thing is that it's all very well for Catherine Deneuve to say this, but Catherine Deneuve is a powerful woman. She's a global icon, and you know, it's easy for her to say, treat me with respect, and also, you know, you can flirt with me, and if you're not allowed to, that makes me feel like a victim, like a child. Don't treat me like this. I'm a woman of my own. I can tell someone to back off.
But there are 99 other women who've signed this letter, and they're not all in positions of power like Catherine Deneuve.
They all seem to be quite. You know, they seem to be prominent people, albeit porn star. You know, they seem to be women who have perhaps achieved something in the workplace, otherwise they wouldn't be signatories to the letter. And I think one can assume that they're people who've already achieved a certain amount of confidence, and that is not what the Me Too thing is about. It's about women in equal positions who feel importuned by men, and they feel they've got to go along with it because otherwise they may lose out in their jobs or their careers.
Charlie, are there any points that you agree with in this letter?
There's not, no. I think I'd just like to reiterate what you were saying. Basically, this is influential women who do not reflect, like, their views do not reflect the views of the masses who were part of the Me Too movement.
But it's OK for them to make these points, is it?
Yeah, of course they can make them, but I think that, you know, the reputation has been strong. There's feminists in France who are already speaking up against them. There's people like myself and Rosie who obviously are taking issue with parts of the letter as well. I think that it's just a distraction, essentially, sort of quoting Oprah, but like what we need to be focusing on right now are the women whose names we don't know. We need to be getting to know the names of women who are working in industries that aren't prominent, who face sexual harassment, rather than listening to women like these.
And also, I think that it is harassing to be importuned, to be constantly chatted up, to be sent unwanted sexual messages. It is wrong.
They disagree. They say, you know, however repeatedly, however clumsily, a man trying to seduce a woman is not a crime.
It's not a crime, but it's not nice, and you shouldn't have to put up with it. It's a pain.
Aisha?
This letter is, quite frankly, bonkers. I think what it actually does is a massive disservice to men as well. I know lots of men. I know lots of French men, British men, men from all over the world. And to say that men should be allowed to give in to their sexual urges, despite the fact that they could be wild and aggressive, is absolutely wrong. It also takes away from the fact that women don't know or can't differentiate the difference between flirting and sexual harassment. I think this letter, if it had come at any other time, would have been laughed out. It would have been, like I said, described as bonkers. But because it's come at this crucial time where we have a movement going on, we've had, you know, since last year, we had the Million Women's March on London and in the US, all over the world. We've also got another march coming up in a couple of weeks on the 21st of January. This is actually a very crucial time for women who have suffered from sexual harassment to come forward.
I'm going to pause you there, Aisha, because I want to introduce to our audience Julie Dechemin. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. She's a writer and sexologist, and she signed this letter. Julie, I don't know if you heard our last guest, Aisha Ali Khan, say this letter is bonkers.
I don't understand. Bonkers?
Bonkers, mad, crazy. What are you doing?
By signing that letter,
yes.
I'm not crazy at all. I think I'm really. I have sense. I reflect a lot to sign that letter, because I found it's important now that women writers, women journalists, women tell that it's not only one way to think. There is not all that campaigns who consider that women are victims. That is real, that we cannot accept rape, sexual harassment must be punished. That of course, I agree with that. But there is not only one way to think that women are eternal victims. No, women can fight back, and I want to learn when women are aggressed, they can fight back. We can learn that. We can learn also that women and men can seduce and can make mistakes in seduction.
Okay, there are two women sitting next to me in our studio here in London who there was a sharp intake of breath as you said that last bit. Rosie, do talk to Julie.
Well, Julie, I think this is part of the French national character, that, you know, you love being the sort of sexy nation, and I think that your use of the word puritanical is quite interesting. It's sort of like, yeah, but in France, you know, we wear our silk stockings and our Chanel No. 5, and sexuality is very, very important in the sort of French cultural message. And I think that this is a defence of France against the kind of, you know, the puritanical and the not interested in having fun countries like the UK and America, and I think it is, you know, Possibly the Me Too campaign, you know, like all campaigns, it has to gain enormous amount of ground before it levels out. And maybe there are some men who have been wrongly chastised. I doubt it. I don't think it makes women feel like victims. I don't think it makes women feel like babies. I think it makes women feel more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not I don't defend the French idea of sexiness idea. I defend the human beings. And I think in the UK, in the America, in Algeria, when I came back, in France, and in Belgium, we are all the same. We want the peace. I think I'm a feminist if feminism is equality between men and women, and I think that's possible.
Yeah, but having 100 texts from your phone from someone who's sexually pursuing you is not equality. It's harassment, and it's annoying, and it's not equal. It's not unequal. It's not even flirting.
It must be punished. We must be a sexual harassment can exist. I'm agree with that. That can be. We can say, oh, that's normal. Yeah, men are men. No, I must say no. But for the moment, there is also a lot of frustration in the world, in the men world, but in the world in general. And frustration provoke, I think, harassment, rape, and that we must find solution. And I think this campaign would make that subject now.
Okay, I can see Aisha, who's in a studio in Leeds, disagreeing with you. She's shaking her head in disagreement. Go ahead, Aisha, talk to Julie.
I think what the letter actually does is completely ignore the notion of consent. So what if somebody fancies you? Does that person have a right to pursue you relentlessly, as mentioned before, sending text messages, phoning, turning up, stalking? And if you don't give in to these advances, then your career could be outlined. This is not fair on women. And I think also you've mentioned the fact that this is a response to the movement, and all these women have come forward and talked about incidents that have happened previously 10, 20, 30 years ago. What we actually are ignoring are the fact that women who have actually suffered sexual harassment and assault and so on, but who have not been able to come forward, who have not been able to take part in the Me Too hashtag campaign or Name Your Pig campaign, the equivalent in France. These are women who will never be able to articulate and express their frustration at what happened to them. So instead of concentrating on what the men want, because obviously, you know, we have to understand that men, they are able to exercise self-control, especially over their sexual urges. Why are we taking that away from men? Why are we not saying to men, control yourselves? If a woman is not interested, she's not interested, move on, leave her alone. This letter is giving a green light to not just these men who want to engage in unwanted sexual harassment and sexual conduct, but also to victims. It's giving them the notion that they can't come forward, that if they do come forward, they're going to be labelled as attention-seeking or just awkward or a prude. And that's the mentality we need to tackle. So this letter is actually going to cause more damage than any benefits.
OK, well, I'd very much like to hear what men think of this letter, who are watching right now. Charlie, what do you think about what Isha said, that this letter is going to cause such a lot of damage?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's really bizarre that we're in a place where so many women feel like they need to come to the defence of men. Like, that's not what we need right now. We need the conversation to keep happening around Me Too, and to not sort of get segued into this focus of protecting people who have caused other people so much harm over the centuries.
Stevie tweets this: there is a massive difference between flirting, chatting someone up, and harassment, and it happens to both women and men. People of all sexes need to be taught what is too far, because quite a lot of people don't understand this. A tweet from Common Sense: Catherine Deneuve is absolutely spot on. Of course, this will upset all the PC feminists, but it is true. P.S. Please stop interrupting your guests when you disagree with them. That's to me, obviously. April tweets this: OK, Deneuve's letter is bonkers, but also feminists career-shaming porn actresses is also pretty weak stuff. Don't know if that's to you or... Right, OK. So, Julie, there's going to be... I mean, there is already a number of feminists, members of the Me Too campaign, people who've not got involved in the Me Too campaign, who are really quite cross now that there are appears to be a divide between women. What do you say? And this is because of your letter. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I say that's sad, because really that's not what I'm saying. Huh? The woman just before you say that. No, I'm not saying that poor men and that women are victims. Of course, I'm on the way of the woman and of the man and of victims. It's important, so important that she recites all the helps first, and then that she said that it was that's a crime. Rape is a crime. Sexual harassment is a crime. Harassment is a crime, and we must punish. I say that to women, to men, and to all the countries. That's all the same. And there's a lot of things now to move, but.
I'm going to bring in another signatory, Julie, if I may. Sexual harassment in this country, by the way, is not a crime. Anne-Elisabeth Moulet, a French journalist and columnist for the Daily and Sunday Telegraph. I think you're a signatory, is that right?
Yes. Yes. I've signed this.
Yeah, welcome to the programme. Why did you sign it?
I signed it because, I read the letter. The letter is written by 4 friends of mine, and it starts by saying rape is a crime, sexual harassment in the workplace is a crime, and it goes on saying that what started as a useful movement denouncing things that were a problem has morphed into a kind of online lynching of people who can't defend themselves and who lose their jobs, who lose their livelihoods, who sometimes are forced to literally disappear. And there's a feeling that what was sanitary has turned out into a kind of virtue signaling 1-minute hate.
OK. I would like Charlie and Rosie to answer that point. There are some men who've been accused of sexual harassment on social media who have lost their jobs. There has been no process. There's been no legal process, criminal process, HR process. They have simply been told, you're not working for us anymore, because there has been a deluge of messages on social media. How do you respond to that? Which is the point that Anne-Marie just made.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important for processes to be in place, but, I'm pretty much always going to try and believe women when they come forward and tell me that something bad has happened to them. I haven't actually come across any instances that I've personally found to be problematic in terms of men losing their jobs, but I'm sure that there are a few out there that have been, I don't know, carried out in ways that that other people would find to be like an issue. But I suppose, yeah, we're still in a place where a lot of people are not able to sort of even take their accusations of rape to trial, and I just think that we should believe women when they say that they feel uncomfortable and support them in any which way that we can.
OK.
Yeah.
OK, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. Thanks for coming on the programme. Thank you.
Feminists have criticised 100 prominent French women after they signed a letter saying that men are being unfairly targeted when it comes to sexual harassment claims. Well, to talk to us more about this, France 24's Lisa Nesselson joins me on the set. Lisa, will you talk us through, first of all, what the letter actually says?
OK, well, I haven't had time to read any of the outcry or the rebuttals. My primary text is the actual letter, which I'm fortunate enough to be able to understand in French. I don't know if it's been poorly translated, but I would have no qualms about signing this letter. The very first line is rape is a crime. But they go on to say that attempts at seduction, however awkward or aggressive, are not. And we are in the process, at least in the English-speaking world, a great deal, of criminalizing the very idea of hitting on someone who does not want to be hit on, as if you could magically know that. There's a way to do that. There's a way to not do that, of course, and there always has been. But, of course, now this very carefully thought-out, well-reasoned essay with examples written by some very, very prominent people and signed by some very prominent people has been reduced in headlines and sound bites to Deneuve says, okay for men to hit on women. So what they're saying here is that it's never okay to be violent. It's never okay to be inconsiderate. But it goes hand in hand. If you have the right to say no, which you always do, then somebody else has the right to try and entice you or convince you otherwise. So if someone comes up to me and says, hey, what's your sign? I can either say, please go away. I can say, does that work? Or I can say, I'm a Gemini. What are you? How do you know if you don't try? And so they're saying that this sort of baby with the bathwater business is leading to censorship of art. There are people who say, this painting offends me. It's of a prepubescent girl and she seems to be in a lascivious pose. But until last week, that museum, that piece of art was in a museum and everyone acknowledged that it was art and not offensive. And even if it was offensive, that was your problem, not the art's problem. Censorship of films, of language, and of course, of the way men and women can relate to each other. So this letter gives good examples, and I don't see any reason why they should be embarrassed or feel like they're over the hill and don't get it.
Well, you touched on sound bites there. This is certainly one of the sound bites, or one of the headlines that is coming out. Deneuve says it's okay to hit on women. It's okay to chat them up, as we'd say in the UK. Deneuve is a huge movie star here, and she's probably the most prominent person, I suppose, or the most well-known individual to have signed that letter, albeit there are many others who are well-known. She's a woman of a certain age. What do you think in terms of the generational approach to this? Because we've seen a lot of younger women up in arms, rightly so in many respects over this, but there's another, reaction to this coming from a woman of a certain age in France.
That's an excellent question, but I think we'd do well to look at Catherine Deneuve's life and how she's lived it. She has been modern, contemporary, completely taking responsibility for herself and her behavior every step of the way. She's been in movies since she was a teenager. She was a young unwed mother, what we would call an unwed mother, and she said, so what? I loved, the father of my child at that moment, and, we have a great kid. Every step of the way, and also something that I don't know if this has been brought up elsewhere, but when I learned of it years ago, impressed me enormously. In 1971, here in France, there was something called the Manifesto of the 343. That was 343 women who affixed their names to a text written by Simone de Beauvoir stating that they had had an abortion, when abortion was completely illegal. It was published in Le Nouvel Observateur. The women admitted they had had abortions, so it follows that they had had sex. And here's some of the people: Catherine Deneuve, Agnès Varda, Jean Moreau, Micheline Prel, Françoise Sagan, and Marguerite Duras. Now, that's a very impressive list of talented women.
Indeed.
They were dubbed sluts at the time. And interestingly, one document that circulated but was never published said, I declare that I was an accomplice to a woman who aborted, and the men who signed include François Truffaut. So not that long ago, some of the members of the current wave of feminists said that they should stop calling this the Manifesto of the Sluts. And Jean Moreau, who's no longer with us, but who piped up and said, no, I was proud of being a slut then, and I insist on continuing to be one. Simone Signoret called them up and said, why didn't you include me? And what's great about this is not that women had abortions, but that they couldn't go after that many famous people. And so 3 years later, abortion became legal in France. So this is a discussion about sexual harassment, but sexual assault. No one is saying sexual assault has ever been okay, will ever be okay. They're saying a certain flirtatiousness is part of French life. It should be part of life everywhere. And when I think about the fact that in Saudi Arabia, it's not going to be until this coming March that an unaccompanied woman will be able to go to the movies by herself, because the idea is that men are beasts. They have some impulse that they can't possibly control. So the women who have written this are saying that the sexual impulse by its very nature is wild, and there's no reason to try and legislate that beyond reason.
All right, Lisa Nesselson, thank you very much for shedding some light on that letter, because, as you say, it's being interpreted in all sorts of ways. Thank you. Ms. Friedman, thanks for speaking to France 24. You signed the letter. Explain to us why you felt compelled to do so.
Well, first of all, I want to precise that I'm a real pro-feminist woman, and that it's the beginning of this Hollywood-born movement. I wasn't really against it, but I think the direction which it is taking now, which is a sort of a Puritan law and order society, where we are against Woody Allen movies, where naked women represented in paintings should be thrown out of museums, and so on and so on. I think we should not produce too much of victims, but take our head and say, we can say yes and we can say no, and we should educate everybody to be more clear and more liberalized and more proud of being, and not feeling always sort of abundant. You know, a situation where we are sort of a poor little woman.
Absolutely. I mean, so that's why you signed the letter. What is your response? Because feminists are coming out today, they're angered by this letter. They're saying that ultimately those who signed it are trivialising sexual violence. What do you say to people who make that claim?
Well, listen, I mean, sexual violence, I'm not for, it's for sure. But, I mean, there are little differences. When a British minister is taking off his work for he's been touching the knee of a journalist under a table, which is it happens, you know, and you can take this with humor and say nothing really strong happened. So these are things we should be really taking care of and be very precise of not mixing up things and to become sort of a, you know, a moral society where nobody can do anything anymore. So that's the direction where I think we should take. We should be more proud and more conscious of our power.
OK, Gloria Friedman, you're a sculptor and an installation artist. Thanks for expressing your views for us today on France 24.
OK. Thanks.